Hey everyone, Jennifer Lee Chan here from NBC Sports Bay Area. It is a week from the draft. Just think a week from today, the 49ers will be getting ready to make their number 11 overall pick in the NFL draft. It is the highest pick that they've had in quite some time, so it should be exciting. And there are a lot of players that could be a real producer for, several players that could be real producers for the 49ers on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. So with that number 11 pick, they can add someone who's very talented who can contribute from day one. And my colleague, Matt Barrows, who works for the Athletic, always keeps track of all the visits. I'm not sure who his source is, so I don't have this information. So Matt Barrows, definitely check out his piece on the in the Athletic, but he does list all the players that had visits that he knows of. So there are some players that probably have had visits or maybe will have visits in the next couple days that he hasn't listed, but he does know most of them. So it's an interesting list of players. And I think, honestly, like I've been saying for a long time, it is going to be defensive tackle, defensive edge rusher to start. And there are quite a few that visited. So, of the defensive tackles that visited, one guy who I think is a very likely candidate for the 49ers to take at number 11 is Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. So he's a guy that is going to be a first round pick. He has been able to not only stop the run, but he gets through to the quarterback. He's a guy that really kind of fits in and will contribute from day one. He could be three down player, or at least 75% of the snaps on a rotational basis for the defensive line. He's going to have a chance to kind of adapt and get used to the 49ers scheme. Chris Kasarik would work with him, and I think that he would be really productive on the defensive line, especially when you consider that the defensive tackles that they still have are Kevin Gibbons and Jordan Elliott. So there is Evan Anderson, who was an undrafted free agent last year. I do expect him to take a step up as well this year, but they need to replenish that defensive tackle position. Um, Three other defensive tackles that Matt Browse says have visited: Darius Alexander from Toledo, Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, and Aeneas Peoples. Aeneas Peoples from Virginia Tech. So, Aeneas Peoples from Virginia Tech. Um, those three guys are going to be later round picks. So could be day two, could be day three, probably day two. But if the 49ers don't take a defensive tackle in the first round, they're definitely going to take one in the second round. I mean, I just think that that's where they have to replenish on the defensive side of the ball. There are five offensive tackles. I know everybody is wanting to have the 49ers replenish the offensive tackle class, and there are five that visited. So Matt Barrow says Kelvin Banks out of Texas visited, Josh Simmons, Ohio State. Important to say that Josh Simmons, who has a first round grade by a lot of draft pundits, he has a patellar tendon injury. And patellar tendon injury is what Drake Jackson has, which is keeping him off the field. It's also, um, it's a very difficult injury to come back from. It is painful. Mike McGlinchey had the same issue, and he still feels pain. So it's kind of one of those things that is a red flag. I mean, he could take a redshirt year, but there's no telling whether he's actually going to come back fully 100%. So he could take a redshirt year. I just don't think he's a guy that they want to take in the first round or even the second round when they've got so many other holes that they need to fill. Josh Simmons, talented guy, but the injury history is kind of an issue. Other offensive tackles that they did meet with: Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon, Anthony Belton from North Carolina State, Erante Essery from Minnesota. So they did meet with all of those offensive tackles. Maybe they could take one a little later that's going to be a developmental guy. Colton McKivitz is only under contract for another season. So it could be a guy that they think could either take over at the right tackle position for Colton McKivitz when maybe he's gone next year. But it's not going to be a guy that's going to start. So their offensive tackles are set. They do need a swing tackle, though, with Jalen Moore gone, and he is with the Kansas City Chiefs now as the left tackle. They do need a swing tackle. So they need a guy who, if Trent Williams gets hurt, he's had history of where he's out for 3 or 4 games. Going to need a guy who is reliable at left tackle, and that could be where they fill the need in the draft. All right, so there are five defensive ends that Matt Barrows says have visited. Michael Williams from Georgia, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, James Pierce, Tennessee, David Walker, Central Arkansas, and Elijah Roberts from SMU. Um, they're not the name marquee players that have been listed as first round picks. So what this is kind of telegraphing to all of us is that defensive tackle is maybe the priority with Walter Nolan, and then defensive edge rusher is the second priority. I do think they draft at some point a defensive edge rusher, but I also know that they really like Yetur Gross-Matos. Now, Gross-Matos is a guy who really stood out in training camp last year. And it just was unfortunate because had the knee injury. He had a procedure during the season. He went on IR. So they didn't get what they had expected from Yetur Gross-Matos. So I would really think that he is a guy who takes a huge step up this year. He can play on the outside and he can also shift in and play inside. So he's a guy that they're going to utilize a lot more this season. And then these five guys who they brought in for visits could be guys that they take in later rounds. All right, linebacker. They brought in two so far. Obviously, they have Fred Warner, but they do need a weak side linebacker with Dre Greenlaw's departure to the Denver Broncos. I know. Chris Paul out of Ole Miss and Kane Madrano out of UCLA. So both of those guys have come in for a visit. Now, again, these visits don't necessarily mean that the 49ers are going to draft them, but they want to get to know them a little better. Sometimes these guys maybe aren't guys that they're going to take this draft, but it does get them kind of one-on-one time. And then they can maybe, if they come up open during free agency or if, when teams make cuts down to 53, that's a guy who maybe ends up on a practice squad. So a lot of these visits can end up being guys that they take in the future. I mean, a lot of guys that they pick up during free agency, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have said, oh, we liked him coming out. So all of these evaluations, last for the player's entire NFL career. So when they do come up during free agency, they've had contact with them in the past. So while it may or may not mean that they are on the list for being drafted this year, it's a kind of conglomerate of information that they keep for future reference when they are looking for players. I mean, you just think about DJ Reed. I mean, that is one of the 49ers' worst decisions ever is letting DJ Reed go. He has been reliable. He's been a guy who stays on the field all the time. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch thought they would be able to stash him on the practice squad. Seattle saw him immediately and picked him up, and he was a starter by that season. And he's proved to be a really, really good, reliable player. So, they, as much as sometimes these players, don't end up on their team as a draft member, it could be a guy they poach off a practice squad in the future, like how Seattle picked up DJ Reed. So, all right, those are the linebackers. Chris Paul out of Ole Miss, Kane Madrano out of UCLA. Interior offensive line, Marcus Bow, with the silent M, it's Mbow, but it's pronounced Bow. Marcus Bow from Purdue, Jonah Monheim from USC, and Caleb Rogers out of Texas Tech. So interestingly, Jonah Monheim out of USC, he was a guard, but he at the Senior Bowl played center. So I know everybody out there is just wanting Jake Brendel to retire or move on. He actually is a good player. They like him. Kyle Shanahan has said, we like Jake Brendel. He plays with the best of them up there. He's a good pass protector, and John Lynch says so too. But they could be looking to bring in a guy who can grow and learn. And honestly, Kyle Shanahan is not going to swap out a rookie center right now. What centers have to do for Kyle Shanahan and his scheme is a lot. There's a lot to their kind of job list, and a rookie is just not who they want to have in there. If you look at, the history of the 49ers, they have not drafted a center since they've been here, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. But it is a need to add depth, so it could be that. But also they have Matt Hennessy. So Matt Hennessy they signed in December of 2024. That's a guy who could be Jake Brendel's backup, but not. They need to take a look at a lot of guys, and maybe a guy who can play guard and center is a guy that they want to get to know. They want to talk to him because maybe in the future, that's what they need. All right, so cornerback, Quincy Riley out of Louisville, Bilal Cohn out of Western Michigan, and Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. So I don't think they draft a cornerback in the first 2 days at all. They might add cornerback as depth later in the draft, which I think they probably will because there's such attrition at cornerback and they need guys to take over when guys get hurt. So I do think that, they will draft someone at some point and maybe a couple undrafted free agents. The cornerback is a position that they always want to have extras around. They need depth and they could get it in the draft. So again, Quincy Riley, Louisville, Bilal Cohn, Western Michigan, and Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. Tight end. So there are three tight ends, and Tyler Warren is not one of them. Three tight ends that the 49ers brought in. That's Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green, Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech, and Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech. Um, the one tight end that everybody has been fascinated with is Tyler Warren. I don't think he's available for the 49ers at 11, but I also think with the 49ers taking a tight end in free agency, I just don't think that they need another one. And the ones that they've looked at are, blocking tight ends. Tyler Warren is more of a route running, pass catching tight end, which is what he's done. He's not afraid to block, but when you have a pass catching tight end in George Kittle, who seems to just be getting younger, he's been healthier, he's stayed healthy, no, even though how hard he plays. I just don't think the 49ers go with a tight end in the first day, especially not in the first day when they spent the most money in their free agency um, on a tight end. I just don't think they do it. And George Kittle still, in his prime, even though he's 31 years old, I just don't think they take a tight end with that number 11 pick. Tyler Warren is not going to be there by the time the 49ers have their second pick at number 43 in the second round. So I just don't think it's going to happen. So, in other news, the NFL announced NFL players, alumni, legends who are going to make picks for their teams, their former teams, when they're at the NFL draft. And the 49ers legend is Julian Peterson. Julian Peterson was drafted at number 16 overall in the 2020 draft. So he's part of the 25th year celebration or 25th year anniversary. He was drafted 25 years ago. Can't believe it's been that long. But Julian Peterson will be at the draft making one of the 49ers, announcing one of the 49ers picks on day two. So be interesting to see day two, whether it's the second round or the third round, but Julian Peterson will be out there and making an announcement of who the 49ers select. So that is it for today. Happy Thursday, everyone. The draft is only a week away. Leave me a comment. Please subscribe. Please like. Tell your friends. And really appreciate you guys all watching and listening and interacting. So leave a comment and we'll keep you informed of everything that's going on with the 49ers as I hear it. Talk to you soon.